we are going to start the workshop for planning services. It is now just after 2 o'clock. Go ahead. 4 o'clock.
Mountain time.
Those last 2 hours just left me.
So briefly, Board, we have 2 items on the agenda tonight. School siting coordination and a real estate update will be given by Bishop Berlin Duncan. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Marchina to talk about school siting standards and the interlocal agreement.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see you again. I haven't been here in a while. So the way I've broken down the presentation is starting at the Florida statutes, then I talk about the ILA, then I talk about in this case, I used Osceola County's comprehensive plan as an example, and the land development code. Then we have some observations and some recommendations towards the back. As you know, the Florida statutes, chapter 1013, requires that the school boards and the local governments coordinate for school planning to make sure that public educational facilities are coordinated with plans for residential development. The statute is very interesting because it actually requires the integration of your educational facilities plan with the local government comprehensive plan and regulations.
Hold on a second. Dr. Pace, can we get copies of the presentation that they're doing?
You're all right.
Sorry, I thought you guys had those. So I'm on slide number 4. Yeah. So in addition to requiring that coordination and the integration of your educational facilities plan with the local government comp plan, the statute also requires the school board and the local governments enter into an interlocal agreement. And of course, you and the county and the cities have done that. The original one, at least going back to where I can find, there's one in 2003, one in 2009, and the current one was done in 2013. So slide 5. So the governmental entities and you are to share information regarding school facilities, and under the statute, the location of schools is supposed to be consistent with the comp plan for the appropriate governmental entity. So there is some authority for the governmental entity to be able to say, this is where we think it is appropriate for schools to be located, these types of land use areas. There are 2 times when the local government gets to basically give an approval on school locations. One is 60 days before the school board purchases property for a school, we're supposed to go ask the county or the city, the appropriate city, for a determination of consistency, okay? And
Is that like the facade? So like if the school site is there, you're talking about like the look of the outside, or?
No. If we're going to buy a piece of property, okay, 60 days before we buy it, we have to say to the county, hey, we're looking to buy the school site, want to make sure that we can get a consistency determination from you as to location. Okay, so that's a very general determination.
And do we have all of those for the previous, say, 10 years of doing this?
Always been done.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have those on record, though? Yeah.
And then 90 days before you actually go to begin construction of a school, then you go back and ask for consistency with the comp plan. And Julius, that is where they actually can look at compatibility with the site, with the area, and a few other access items and road impacts and so on and so forth. I'm sorry?
I want to give a
Please,
little background
please, yeah,
why
yeah,
we're
yeah,
doing this.
absolutely.
When I first came on, one of the first things that I saw when I met with Rhonda was that our lawyers, I'm not going to say they were wrong, had grazed out of what I call the school board lane, and there were things in the development agreements that had nothing to do with our building or erection. So I wiped it out and said, it doesn't, we're staying in our lane. What reason we're going over this with you is we are seeing one or more of the governments attempting, in my opinion, to go outside their authority and lane using the ILR, which was done before everybody here, and basically say, we want you to plant 100 trees on your property, et cetera. It's causing economic impact to us on delays and money. And so basically, what the purpose of this is to take it through and alert you that unless you tell us not to, we're going to go to each government and say, look, we got to redo the ILR and we got to stay in our lanes. On our side of the fence, I mean, what we own, you don't get to tell us you wanted to be a pink building, a blue building, 5 trees, no trees, et cetera. On the other side of the fence, where we have, within the statute, we understand you do, but we have, what happens is they turn over staff, and you have staff who starts thinking they can basically design the school. And so we've got to get everybody,
Where is that happening?
it's paid here.
So each of the agencies currently are doing
Yeah,
that.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, but where?
Different degrees.
What do you mean by?
Which schools is that happening?
Oh,
What site?
we went through it with Island Village, Knightsbridge, Sunbridge, basically any school. So the ILA connects us to the school siting standards, which are part of the land development code.
Yeah.
And that's really where all the gray is
And I
between
want to get to
the
that.
rights.
And we're going to
yeah.
try and get everybody, and we know at least one administrator is very supportive of, yeah, we need to do that. I need my people to stay in their lane and not be out of their lane. So I think we'll have some, at the higher levels, they'll understand it. But we've got to get this reconciled because Dave will tell you, it's costing him money in terms of delays in projects.
And time.
And
yeah.
time.
And time.
Correct.
So as you'll see, there is certainly a lack of clarity between the statutes, the ILA and the comprehensive plan and the land development code. And our objective is to inject some more clarity. It's not to get or not to get, but to inject some more clarity into this. So for example, Florida Statute 101351 on slide 6 allows the school board to pay for your share of roads and sidewalks if the road or the sidewalk is contiguous to or runs through a school site. Also applies to other types of utilities. The law also allows you to pay for your proportionate share of improvements off-site to the extent needed by your educational facility. What it doesn't allow you to do is to bring up to service the facility that may have some shortcomings disconnected from the school construction. And that's an important point.
Which we've had at least one entity want us to build the road
Yeah. Next
beyond
slide.
what we need.
That's the discussion that we were talking about with St. Cloud.
Yeah, with that road on the north part of it and Nova.
So then, as the statute required, in 2013, you and Osceola County and Kissimmee and St. Cloud entered into the interlocal agreement. As I said before, superseded the ones from 2003 and 2009. That ILA created a technical working group that meets quarterly. And, this all happens behind the scenes. Basically, they gather information, review student projections, look at future land use impact from developments that are upcoming, and the school planning facility function is really done there. There are 2 sections in the ILA that I think are really important. Slide 8. The 2 most significant are sections 4 and 5. Under section 4, that technical working group can review and comments on proposed school sites. Okay? There's actually a school siting book that the school board staff puts together that is updated from time to time that has a lot of information regarding school projections, forecasting into the future that's reviewed by that technical working group.
Who makes up the technical working group?
So the technical working group is representatives from the county, both municipalities, and the district.
And on that one, I'm sorry, because this kind of happened recently, and I saw it on a board meeting, just to see if we're following on the same track. I remember Rhonda and I speaking before about co-locating some of the parks and recreation. Like when we do a new development, the county gets like 5 acres for parks and recreation, and we get however many acres to build a school site. And I saw it on the most recent agenda with the Whaley property, that we try to do that. So is that like a new standard that we kind of agreed to at the technical working group, or was it just that specific development that was willing to work together?
It's always been there, but we're just starting to see all the developments come through that have been impacted by that language that was implemented into here. But I can look at administrations prior to me that they've often tried those agreements. I mean, like Thacker and Central, their school campuses are opened after hours and the weekends. We have agreements with the city of Kissimmee. Neptune and Parkway, we have after-hour agreements. So there are some schools on a smaller scale that are already on joint use, but all of the newer developments, based on the county or the cities, if it's in their funds to meet their park and recreation long-range plans, then we start talking about the co-location of the parks, because each of them have their own long-range plan for parks and recreations as well, and that's how they decide which one of our schools they want to join together to create the joint parks. So they're really not wanting to do it with every school. It's based on where their needs are to meet their community needs as well.
But what do they, and I guess I'm not a part of that technical working group, I kind of wish I was, then what do they do with their land then? If they don't want to build another park, they get 5 acres dedicated to them, do they just leave it vacant? Or-
Well, the developer has to do 5 acres at a minimum, but as far as the county coming together with us, creating a larger park concept, that is contingent as well upon their long-range park and recreation plan. So that's where they'll actually put money toward more enhancements toward the park other than what we're going to bring in under a normal school.
So in section, slide 9, in section 4.3, the technical working group, I listed the areas that they get to look at: environmental sustainability, transportation, pedestrian access to the school site, availability of infrastructure and services to the proposed school site, safety concerns, land use compatibility. There's sort of a catch-all that I'm not quite sure what's covered in there, but I'm sure that the local government entities bring up other issues when they're looking at school sites. In section 4.4, your staff presents to the technical working group a list of information. The list is set out in slide 10 and slide 11, and as you can see, is pretty detailed, including, by the way, one of them is the ability to avoid the need for a new school by expansion of an existing school. And the example that Rhonda and others gave me was St. Cloud High School in connection with that. Let me go to slide 12. Your section 4.5 of the ILA, as I said earlier, you must ask the local government that is involved for consistency with the land use categories at least 60 days before you buy the site. The local government has 30 days to answer to you. A key item of the ILA is on 4.6, section 4.6. The local government basis for review of school sites is then based on state law and the applicable interlocal agreements. So I try to basically say, okay, where do we look to? Because there's lack of clarity. Well, we look to the statutes, and sometimes the statutes are clear, and sometimes, you've had a bunch of groups providing input to the legislature, and you read it, and it's the old concept of, boy, somebody was making sausage here because everybody got a little bit. And when you read it, it's not very clear. It leaves a lot to figure out between the local governments and the school boards. And that's part of what I think Frank and Rhonda and I and
So
others.
this creates an environment of extreme flexibility on our part, right? In the end, they're essentially assuming the role of some kind of advisory committee or,
To some extent, but they view it as giving them a lot of authority to.
as long as they have something in the
Approve.
statute or something within the island.
Right, that's right, that's right.
And they broadly interpret it, which we don't agree with.
But then it comes to enforcement, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, then you have to go to the state statute and,
It-
right? I mean,
Yeah, but then they don't give you the
We
permitting.
determination of consistency.
We have always tried to make peace so we could get his projects moving. The reality is, if we don't get this straightened out, we may be coming down to where we're in court asking the judge to say, no, 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 this is what it is.
okay, I see where the road is.
Slide 13. So then section 5 of the ILA talks really is the one that addresses the infrastructure that is needed for the schools. 5.1 says who has the decision for determining the timing and the need, and as you can see is sort of a joint decision between the school board and the local government. We can't go and tell the county, you have to build this road because we're going to build the school, but they can't also tell us, you can't build that school because we're not going to have a road. You know, it's a give and take. Both governmental entities are supposed to try to work together, and that's the whole concept of us providing information to them sufficiently in advance for them to be able to do their plan. 5.2 then states clearly that the school board is responsible for the on-site improvements, and we get to pay for reasonable off-site improvements that are contiguous and necessitated by the school site. It can't be something that the local government just wants, and we can't go a block or two away from the school site. It needs to be right adjacent to our school site.
Like a red light, like if, we're causing a left turn,
One of the
Perfect
areas
example.
here,
Turn lanes.
Yeah.
one of the areas here that has popped up as an issue is they're wanting us to build huge stacking on our property and to build stacking lanes out on there, so that, because these parents show up like an hour early and they back down the street, et cetera, and there's, what's reasonable and what isn't is an issue that we deal with now.
So in the last bullet point in slide 13, it's an important point because there are situations where we say, look, we got to go with this school site, and the local government may say, we're not going to have funding to build that road until 4 years from now, 5 years from now. The ILA does allow for the school board in certain situations to move forward with building the infrastructure with an arrangement for us to be paid back at some time in the future whenever the local government was planning to have that improvement in their budget. Now, I know that Dave Sharma back there is, just shaking because, we don't like to be in the road building business. That's the job of the local government entities. But there are times when you can't avoid it because you need to deliver the school. Okay. In
the
that case,
development
we're
world,
supposed to be
the
realistic.
government, you call them oversizing agreements. The city will put in like water pipes that are much bigger than are needed for that development, but they run past a ton of empty property, and as those properties come on, the government gets repaid the percentages for having expanded it. We do everything we can to fight against building a road that we don't need. Right? It's like, and we'll tell you when we're getting stuck with it, because it's not our business. We don't build roads.
So in slide 14, this
Now, is
is,
there a differential between, excuse me, I apologize, between a site, like, let's say the one on Nova Road, it's not in a subdivision, we bought that plot, versus one that's within a subdivision, kind of like Ronin, because within that subdivision, isn't the developer responsible for building those roads and not the county?
so.
I'm just wondering, is there a distinction
Yeah.
between the two?
No, excellent point. The answer is yes. But quite often what happens is your staff has to do some really important negotiating to try to make sure that the roadway and the utilities are going to be at the site when you guys need it, rather than when the developer needs it and wants to get it there.
For example, Rhonda, the one project you and I have been working on, the school site is in the back of the development, the phases. So the developer may not get there for 1, 2, 3, 4 years if the economy goes down, et cetera. But we got to get a school up because we got a whole area to serve. And that's the one we try and really figure out.
Aren't they supposed to provide you with all of that?
Ready to build
based-
site, exactly.
Yeah, ready to build
Right.
site.
And I think part of this is,
But the timing is often what gets.
Well,
the
but don't they get
issue.
impact fee credits and stuff? I mean, so can't we hold that up and everything?
well, I think remember, prior to this board, there was a direction that we were never to say no, and we were not to, that we could always deal with development, correct, Rhonda?
Well, the school capacity report indicates,
But we were not to say to the county, we objected to a development, et cetera.
well, we took the stance of not approving it
Right.
tonight.
I think we need to be empowered to say to a developer, we can't tell the county we're okay with this if you don't build that road. Or alternatively, we're starting to look at the fact there could be a time when we say, we can't agree we have capacity because we can't get the teachers we need to run a school. But let's stick just right now with transportation. The board needs to empower us to really be, what I would say, much firmer in negotiations where we have the ability to go, we're not compromising, you need to
We
compromise.
can't do it, basically.
Right.
But I do want to answer John's question.
Yes.
Or, sorry, Mr. McWillis' question. They do not get their impact fee credits until we convey the site. So if the site hasn't been conveyed, for instance, the one at the back of the development, then they will not get their impact fee credits until the site is actually
I
conveyed
also
to
It's like
us.
thought that they also got some impact-free advancements, right, like trade-offs, so nothing changes hands
They
until
do-
conveyance.
No, until,
And
because
that's-
the impact fee credits are for the price of the land. So until the land is ours and it's been appraised, we would not issue an impact fee credit.
Let me also say to you, which Marcus and I have talked about and covered, is our impact fees were based upon roughly a 90,000 some odd dollar value per acre.
Oh, and the last impact fee state was.
We are now paying 300,000, 250 an acre. So the developer's getting a real break. Now, nobody wants to raise, I mean, impact fees are a sensitive thing, but at the end of the day, the school district inadvertently is almost supporting the development because they're not really paying their fair share.
Well, but I want to make sure that I accurately represent
Right.
the developer's perspective.
Right.
In answer to your question, okay? If your question was, look, if they're getting impact fee credits, sort of what do they care? They care because to get to this school site here, they're going to have to spend $10, $15 million to get the roadways to get us back there. The cost of money, it's not just the $10 or $15 million, but the cost of money over the next 3 to 4 years is very significant to any business and is no less significant to a developer. That's part of the problem.
And Phase 1's not going to generate the money that Phase 1 through 5 would generate.
Right.
So you got that economic movement.
So let me ask a frank question here. This was a super, and this is maybe not, this is not what we're going to find here, but this has been an extremely friendly development, county and school district, and everyone involved has been all smiles when it comes to development. This feels like we have turned around an aircraft carrier on a dime here, and now we're saying our posture is completely different. And that has, in my experience, I mean, that's a shock.
But we think this board's empowered us to do it.
Yeah,
quite honestly.
Yeah, but why?
But-
What is the?
But wait a minute, to be fair, I don't want anybody to walk away thinking that we're trying to create an adversarial relationship with the development. That's not, if we're conveying that, then I'm doing a terrible job, okay? I think what we're trying to do is to say there are lots of issues that create friction. And we really want to find between seeking clarity in the statutes, maybe updating the ILA, and doing some more work with the development community to make things a little clearer for everyone and make sure that our position is heard a little louder.
And we're
Yeah, we want to catch up too. I mean, a development can't build a gazillion houses. It takes us 2 years to get a school done. By the time we're done with permitting, review, and everything else like that,
Yeah.
we got to catch up.
You know, part of the issue is, you know, concurrency sort of went away, and, you know, we can, the school board on slide 14, I mentioned that we can comment to the county on concerns regarding a development from the school board standpoint, but the county has no requirement to deny a development just because we say, hey, there are all these issues relative to the school. Now, in fairness, I think Rhonda will tell you that there are a number of times where the county will cooperate with us, and that's one of the things that brings the developer to the table to agree to sell us a site and mitigate on that basis. But, you know, under the rules, the county can basically just say to the developer, go, and we got to go figure out what to do regarding schools. Now, that would
I have
be
a question.
responsible position
Can I
to
finish
take.
answering his one question? Part of the reason it's changing is Dave Sharma came to a meeting, one of my meetings with he and Rhonda, and really laid out what he was experiencing. And I said, well, we've got to deal with this, and we literally went through it and started peeling it back and said, we got to go to the board and tell them we've got to deal with this, and that may mean we take some positions that aren't popular.
And that is, sorry, I'm going to just interject for a quick second, but that is true. So we have to look at the amount of money it's going to cost. We're already, our cost per square foot is really high. And so when we start looking at, well, some of the fights end up, for lack of a better term, they are fights. You can't put a gate up front because you're allowing your traffic to back up because of parents that come up early. Well, stuff like that is not clear in the interlocal agreement. So we felt like the best way to go about this is different staff, depending when they change staff, you get different comments coming back, it's not consistent. So the thought process was this would be the document that would lay everybody out on the same page, and that way we can actually get our schools approved. Because what's happening is in some cases, we're actually having to start construction because we're our own jurisdiction, we have our own building code office, we issue our own permits. We technically don't have to ask the county to give us a permit to start construction. And in order to meet our opening dates, we are starting construction ahead of their permit coming in, and then literally trying to find middle ground before we can get our permits. And so the intent is that we think that this is the cleanest way to do it, get everybody on the same page, and at least we feel like there is a little bit of overlap here, and get that all cleared
By
up.
rewriting an ILA?
Well, everybody's got to remember for clarity, the real document that the counties and the cities use to push back on Dave are the school siting standards, which we haven't gotten to
We're
yet.
going to get to.
Because that's part of the land development code, and that's where they sit down and do all their review comments at a
But-
DRC meeting.
But I think the chair had a
Yes.
question.
Thank you. I think I'm going to sit over there, so maybe my voice is too low back here. Maybe you will answer this later, as I assume, but you mentioned that we could start pushing back if we don't actually have capacity based on staff, for
So
example.
we're starting to look at our ability to do that.
Okay, how would you communicate in dollar cents or something tangible, that gap between what we need in order to open up a school and what is being provided?
I can't answer that for right now.
We-
We've
we
just
haven't
started
done enough work to-
we literally have just started the.
Are there
peeling
other
back.
districts who have done this kind of work before?
Not to my knowledge in Florida.
We led dealing with the crisis in Orange County. We started with, literally, Mel Martinez, they called it shutdown development, and literally, I'm not exaggerating, 15 minutes after he had the press conference, he called over to the school district and asked for me and said, how do we now fix this? And literally, the CFO and I had to sit down and come up with a way, remember this, come up with a way to let development keep working without shutting down the whole and a disaster. This is a slog through the mud, dealing with an issue as an issue as an issue. And right
I
now,
suppose an estimation, Sarah, would be like the soft cost for operation of a school?
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, if we're talking about the need to hire staff that are not readily
Use
available.
vacancy rate, too.
Yeah.
No, it's not a number, it's how short are you?
Yeah, but also like, yeah. Okay, thank you.
I think the key in this whole process is just to make sure that whatever we say is factually completely accurate. We don't add any hyperbole, like I've seen, some people go, they just say, here are the facts.
Yeah.
As a community, we need to figure out how to solve this problem. And we're going to show them facts. This is what's happening, and we need to save money, and because it's costing us and time, et cetera.
So to answer your question, it's not just renegotiating an ILA. If you go to slide 16, that's really where the rubber meets the road. I'm using the county's land development code as an example. We do the same thing with some cloud and so on. So basically, although the reason I threw in 1013-33-1 in here is because I wanted you to see what the statute calls for. The statute calls for local governments to integrate your educational facilities plan, policies, and procedures with the local government's comp plan and LDC. But when you go look at Article 3.1 of the LDC, in the area called intent, okay, it talks about the school citing creating standards that implement the ILA. Okay, so far, we're good. But then it continues to say, and provide additional assurances to the public. The school siting decisions shall advance the urban growth strategy of the Osceola County Comprehensive Plan. That's nowhere in the ILA. That's nowhere in the statute. While it's okay for you to have that view, that's not a requirement. So that's an example of, they get to adopt their school siting standards. We can't tell them not to,
So,
except that it should be limited to what we discussed in the ILA.
so Rhonda, case in point, they established that transportation area where they say, where they're going to build that housing, and they say no schools can be,
A TOD, transit-oriented development.
even though we may need a school there, they go, no, you can't build in that area. So now if you build in another area, you're picking up transportation costs, stuff like, they're very good to work with, but we all need to get back on a very fundamental plan.
Go to the next slide. Another example. Article 310.1 establishes the DRC as the School Siting Review Committee. That committee is not referenced in the ILA anywhere. Next bullet point, it includes extensive requirements and restrictions, including some that are not contemplated by the statute, to be considered by the county because they fall within the Florida Building Code. I think, as you know, you have your own building official that issues permits and so on and so forth for construction within your site. Any of the items, go to the next slide, that are within the Florida Building Code really should not be addressed in the school siting ordinance because that's within your purview, not the local government's purview. An example, 310.1C6E of their land development code contemplates that the land development requirements will not apply if it's in conflict with Florida statutes. because the fact that they're mentioning that even is, sort of raises a question, well, if we know that by statute, why is it being addressed in the Land Development Code? In the next slide, 19, it says that there has to be this agreement as to the division of off-site improvements before you submit for your site development plan. Well, nowhere in the statute or in the ILA is that provided for. It calls for vehicular parking, bicycle parking, air conditioning unit location, refuse collection facilities. All of that detail is supposed to be included in the site plan you submit to the local government entity. But all of those items are permitted by our own school permitting official. So if they fall under the Florida Building Code, then those items really shouldn't be considered by a local government entity.
They're defaulting to what they do all the time.
Exactly.
Treating us like a developer. And we've got to stop that.
The real, go to slide 21. The real practical portions of the school siting section in the Land Development Code appear in 310(1)(e)(l). And that's really what says, look, this is the siting limitations, these are the plans and submittal requirements, and then it says that there's supposed to be a 10-day review. What they refer to, and this is just an example, I don't mean to pick on the county, what they refer to as siting standards are really design standards. And you're not subject to design standards, or at least you shouldn't be. What I think really happens, we can go to 22.
Now, somebody can ask, that's how I was talking about the facade earlier.
Absolutely.
Because I know Celebration has a certain look. Like
Absolutely.
Nuna has like the white brick, whatever, and they may want that, but they could just ask, but they can't mandate that. And if they want to, they can pay for that.
That's how that's been
No
addressed in the
question.
past.
No question.
Right.
You know, the point that Frank has made 2 or 3 times is the issue that I've come across over a lot of years. Remember, these folks only see school sites. I don't know, how many school sites do you have reviewed in a year?
So they haven't had many
It
for
used to be
quite a-
minimum.
Right, and now they suddenly saw like 5 go through or 6 go through this
But
year.
but even with 5 or 6, they see hundreds of development, right?
Correct.
So when we walk in the door, instead of saying, you know, the staff person that's reviewing these things, instead of saying, hey, wait a minute, this is a school district and there are these special rules that apply to them, let me go look at these rules, their reaction is, this is just another development.
Correct.
Okay? So the comments that you're getting back are just standard development and to be fair, I think Dave and Rhonda and their staff is able to go back and say, hey, look, guys, you know, we're not subject to this, we can't apply, you can't apply this to us, we're not subject to this. But it takes a lot of time and effort to do that every time, rather than having clarity.
Virtually every project, Ronder's called me and said, Frank, I need you to go to leadership of the county and get this resolved.
So we submit a packet to them, or how are they getting this info? Okay, are we not able to include in the packet?
So where the conflict continues is, to me, their land development code for school siting standards is outdated, as well as it has been approved that gives them what their staff, as a staff member, they think they had the authority to write all the extra in there that's above and beyond what we're required to do. So in fairness, their staff has a land development code, which they're told to apply to us, and then our debate becomes, your school siting standards are overreaching because we only have to abide by Florida Building Code and SREF. So we get in, every project becomes the same argument. So we're asking to rewrite the school siting standards, send those suggestions over to the counties and the 2 cities. And if we can clean those up, we believe that's the start, and then the ILA,
Yep.
and then we'll get to where.
Yep.
Will that be applied to their school siting standards, though?
They are their school siting standards, but they should be written to meet the statutes. And that's where we're back to, is having that conversation to show that they're above and beyond. the
I think another
statute.
thing too is to be consistent, because you're talking about the land development code of the county, but the cities can
It's all
have their
three
own
agencies.
code
Yes.
too.
I have
So I want to
three
make sure
different-
that
I-
we're,
I didn't
Dave's
wanna-
not thinking, okay, I'm
I didn't
applying
have a
to Kissimmee, I gotta have this kind of
57
argument versus the city,
And
that kind of
The
argument.
most troubling part is the staffs change. So as soon as we've got the working relationship with staff X,
Yep.
suddenly now we got a new one and we're going back
We have to start
to
over.
ground zero.
And that's the whole purpose of having
What do you mean by
an
the development?
updated
And
land
to be
development.
honest, this seems very foreign, because this is like a one call, we share lobbyists with Olay, right? The first cousin of the superintendent is on the county commission who was on the school board. I mean, this is like, seems like a why would we even have, why would it be even necessary? I don't understand why you're even involving the school board when this is the smallest government interaction town anywhere on the planet.
Because this is going to burble up to the elected officials. And when it does.
Why
we-
weren't the elected
we don't
officials
want-
called? Why didn't they already resolve that?
Because.
Why isn't it a call? Like, why isn't it a call to Ricky and say, hey, Ricky, so-and-so and
Guess what?
so-and-so, and then they get completely issues resolved?
What we're not saying is the multiple, I alluded to it, the multiple times Ron has come to me, and those calls have been made. But it's still delaying us because they only get so far. So out of respect for you all, as my client and the board, we want you to know where we're going with this, so that if you get feedback, you understand
Yeah, but
we're not
why
creating
is
issues.
my question. Like, why is that? Why is this becoming necessary? Why is the posturing change necessary?
I don't think it has changed. This is policy stuff, and the policy is what the board oversees. And we're letting the board know we need to get policy clarified.
But we're not rewriting the ILA.
We're gonna ask that the ILA be rewritten.
If you look at 23,
Yeah, right.
our suggestions are threefold. You mentioned lobbyists. I think we ought to consider going to the legislature and asking for some additional clarity in
I
what
could
is
fix it like that.
under our purview and what is under the local government's purview. I think you ought to consider approaching the local governments that are part of the ILA and try to inject some more clarity into this so that you're able to reduce the amount of staff time on both sides, number one, as well as the amount of time that it takes to go through these things every single time that a school site comes up. And the last one is, we really need to work with each of them to say, guys, your land development code school siting standards need to come into alignment with the ILA and the statutes. I think that's basically where you are.
How do we ensure this problem is fixed moving forward, though, when you mentioned the 2003 ILA, the 2009, you mentioned in meetings with me that you had a staff member look at a 2009 one versus the 2013. So how do we clear up, if we do move forward with this, that the new one for 2023, whatever, is what's checked by this staff that may turn over?
We write it, bring it to you, and go over it very methodically. You all go, that's very clear for the goals that the district has, and that's what we go forward.
But how do we
Is that
ensure
the-
that's the document they're
Yeah.
referencing every time a new project comes their way, no matter who's in front of it approving the project?
So in these governmental interrelations kind of situations, one of the things that I have found over 25 years to work the best is for each side to have a basically problem-solving single point of contact, where you designate one of your staff people, okay? There's Dave or Rhonda or whoever, and the local government designate one of theirs, so that when somebody here is providing comments that are not consistent with the updated agreements, here, you call there and you say, hey, so-and-so is not, doesn't understand.
Which is what we
And
did
it's
I
that
think
person's
2
job.
weeks ago.
More with what we're getting to, or not to put words in your mouth, is, first of all, why are they looking at different ILAs? So is part of this conversation going to be, and this is the one moving forward, burn the rest of them?
Yes. There's only one island. That's
Right.
all. And so it's going to be, this is the island.
clear.
Exactly. Now, what we did do 2 weeks ago, Rhonda and I met with the real estate people at the county, and we finally had a county official say to Rhonda and me, I agree, I'm the point of contact, the buck stops with me, come to me if you have a problem.
And what history has taught me is the school signing standards reference a specific year. I would recommend we take out the year of an agreement and say the most current, approved document. It's kind of like we stopped dropping years of SREF into all of our documents because it changes every so. So I think if the school citing standards were to say for the most current approved ILA, and if
What
the
would you
ILA
do,
says the
Lori?
most.
You say this ILA, any preceding ILA is eliminated and no longer in effect.
By the way, the 2013 ILA very clearly says that it supersedes the 2003 and the
But it's
2009.
Had that issue
But it's the school
recently.
citing standards that reference back to 2000. So that's why it's important to get the school citing
Just get them up
standards
to date.
brought up.
Makes them-
I want you to know, so if you hear somehow that we're creating an issue with that, we're actually trying to make it better for everybody.
And the other thing I wanted to be able to include in that, because I spoke with Rhonda before, was that the whole issue about portables too. I want to be able to have some kind of language into that. Because the reality is, some schools have beyond 15, 20, 30-something portables. You know what I mean? So at that point, something has to be addressed. I mean, how it gets addressed, I'm not married to how, but just the fact is, there should not be a school with 36 portables on it.
But that's not,
That'll be your
There
decision.
are two corollaries to this efficiency thing I need to brief you on. And I ask for consensus that we prepare a letter for the superintendent and the chairman. One is Lake Toho Water is requiring us to describe, and it's costing us money, and we're not getting anything for it. You want to,
So when we go through the permit, the county, for our county permit, one of the agencies, they send our documents to is Toho, if we're in the Toho Water Service area. So I've never seen it before, but Toho requires us to have 2 water connections. And based on that, the fees are tacked to those sizes of the lines and the water meters. It's for redundancy, but there really is no reason for that redundancy from an engineering standpoint or that we could see. And so what we do is we end up paying maintenance fees to Toho that turns out to be quite a bit if you look at the amount of schools we have over long term.
How much is it? $1 million plus a year, at least.
How much?
$1 million plus a year, because they flush
$1.5 million,
them.
didn't you, Dave?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Didn't you say $1.5 million?
it's probably closer to.
The other thing is they flush their system, which not our water, and then we get billed for the water they're flushing.
So there is quite that bit. And I'll use some examples for clarity. So we just had the pre-con with Toho for the Sunbridge project because they finally got us our permit. And they're telling us that, so they're going to hold up our certificate of occupancy. So I put my hand up and be like, you can't because you just don't have any jurisdiction, just so we're clear. Again, it's what they felt that they could do because that's what they do for developers. But we have two water lines coming into there. If we had engineered it the way we wanted to, is we could do one. But their agreements say that they will have the redundant ones. And then also what they're trying to do is require us to put a flush valve at the end of on our hydrants. What they do is they flush their end-of-line water, hundreds of gallons every few weeks, out of that line, but it passes through our meter, so technically we could be on the hook for paying it. So we've started to manually turn those off and tell Toho, I'm sorry, call me, I'm going to be the bad guy. No, we're not doing that. You need to do that on your side of the line. But we end up in cases where we're not able to get our permit because they're imposing those requirements, and we feel like this, again, ties back to that. The last example I use is that Knightsbridge. We still don't have our county permit because Toho has held it up because where we have a lift station there, and they want us to build a retaining wall, or not a retaining wall, but a block wall around it. It's about $15,000. I said no. Our engineer's response is, typically if they're working for a developer, you don't have a choice but to comply with that. So I said no, because as long as you get onto our boundary, our building code official has issued a permit, we have broken ground, we've started building the school, and that's when really the fight that I'm having right now is how do I get my permit, and we need to solve the problem here, because I've said no and we kind of come to a standstill. I mean, we're not in breach of any laws because we have our permits to build, but as we continue to build more schools, this is going to become a repetitive problem. We are a very small team, and I can tell you the amount of time it takes to get in meetings with them over and over the same thing. And again, when the staff changes, you're having to rehash that story. And then I think what happens is the staff comes in and they don't have that ILS, so they go in the records and they pull and they find one. It's like, oh, 2009. Here you go, and then we're having to teach them, I'm sorry, you have to go to 2013. So we think getting this done right, papering it up, is going to help us get more efficient. That's the intent. It's maybe doing a lot more work now so that we can get through this process a lot faster.
The other one, we prepare a letter for you, and I've written before it, is the Kissimmee Utilities Authority. They are permitted by statute to impose a tax for the people who, the entities that receive electricity, et cetera. Both Kissimmee and the county have waived it as it relates to the school board. All right, and we're asking KUA to waive it so we don't pay it. And if you look at it, the way I look at it, it's the public dollars. So, I mean, there's a reason we don't pay taxes, right? So hopefully and again, we're talking significant money. And we're not, if it was like 50 grand, it'd be one thing, but we're talking money where you can use it for teachers, et cetera, and we need to, we're trying to tighten up everywhere, and as we're seeing this stuff in our meetings, we're making notes and saying, okay, we got to go to the board. You're smiling.
Can we use it for teachers though, or can we use it just for some more of our construction costs that we have that are escalating?
I know we can use it definitely for construction. I always look, my first
I just don't want-
default is always how do we take care of our employees?
I know,
All right,
but I
it's
just
just
want to
where it
make
comes
sure that
from.
we don't have that on record if it's not something that we can.
All right, team, we have another workshop that we have to get to. Thank you.
So the balance of the workshop today is for the quarterly real estate update that has been requested by the school board, and I have Bill Rose and Bishop Bill Duncan to do the presentation. Oops.
Yeah, so this won't take too long, because we did all the work last year. So we'll start with Lakeview. Ashton Woods, we're still under contract. We're on our 5th amendment. They've had quite a bit of trouble, and Rhonda can confer with that with the city of St. Cloud. It's been quite frustrating, but Ashton Woods has stuck with us and continued to move forward, and we have allowed them to because they're working in good faith. And so now, DRC meeting was on the 23rd of March. We've got Planning Commission on the 18th of April. The City Council's on the 27th. Second reading is on May 25th. And they are supposed to close on August 14th. They'll be building 194, I believe it's build for rent homes now. And they've fulfilled their obligations. They've had their community meetings. They've worked with the community, the surrounding community. And so I think we're in the home stretch finally. This has been a long process.
Actually, on that one, I saw some folks complaining about it from the city of Kissimmee, not city of Kissimmee, the city of St. Cloud, not wanting 2-story townhouses, that many in there. I mean,
3-story apartments.
yeah, just whatever. So I think, actually with the board, since technically we're extending the approval at some point, do we want to listen in on those conversations and figure out what maybe the local residents may not want? I know it's money in our pocket because we can sell the project, but, I mean, do we want to consider, is that what we want? To put more townhouses right on the back of Lakeview?
It's not townhouses, it's apartments.
You are moving out of your lane.
They don't build
That,
apartments.
that is
Ashton
the
Woods
local
doesn't.
jurisdiction.
No, but
That's what they're seeking zoning change for.
Right.
They're built for rent townhomes, which is the same thing as a fee simple townhome, but it's for rent, which is adding to the affordability issue because of the interest rates right now and not everyone can buy. So it's
And the
helping.
state,
And the only reason why, from a legal perspective,
Practically speaking, they're apartments though, right? I mean,
no,
in
the
effect,
state
no.
building,
Okay, so
the-
technically, no, but
The
practically.
Florida Building Code sees a townhome as a multifamily. So when we're doing our reviews, we always have to be very thorough as the multifamily is a townhome or an apartment complex. So these are going through the city of St. Cloud as townhomes. We did have 2 meetings at Lakeview. Maybe
Community
30,
meetings,
yeah,
yeah.
they were community meetings, maybe 30 people other than the individuals that were there presenting. I do know Ashton has gone back and met with several of the actual residents that will be looking across the street and seeing that, and they're actually adding some additional amenities and buffers that that community has requested to meet their needs. And at this point, the community seems, based on the feedback we're now getting, the immediate community being impacted, they have been amenable to the items that Ashton is adding to their building plan to lessen what they will look across and see.
We should get their testimonial here then. I mean, that would be valuable. I mean, I remember having this conversation and I sat up there and I said, the people in St. Cloud are gonna be really pissed off that we're selling this amount of acres for more development when they're screaming and hollering about development. And now the school board, instead of building something that's useful to the community, assuming that this is not, well, even though it may be, right, people can make that argument, that they're gonna, so, I mean, I remember all the board members being very in favor of it. Now they're doing exactly what the people who came here and complained at the school board meeting were saying, they're doing that, and, I mean, so I agree, it's a good time to reconsider.
and the reason why from the, at least, I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but I'm a real estate broker. From a real estate perspective, the board approves the extensions. We can let it die by not approving the next extension. So if the next extension period doesn't, it says it was extended, the approval, there's 5 amendments.
Expiration on the 29th of August.
Oh, so that was already
Close
approved.
it,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
So now they're
So there is
finishing
no
out for the
option.
terms of the
Yeah.
Fifth Amendment.
And they're gonna close prior to
And
the
so
next one.
it doesn't require board approval to approve an extension of a contract? Like if an extension period is expiring?
It expires on August 23rd. In order to go,
29th, yeah, they're gonna close
29th.
on the 14th.
in order for them to go past the 29th, the board would have to approve.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, so if it reaches that point, and for some, whatever reason,
Yes.
act of
So
God,
we're not
financing,
extending.
lending or
That's
something like
totally your
that.
discretionary call at that point.
Right, so that's what I was thinking about, because I was thinking, because it says the Fifth Amendment, it felt like it was amended before, back in June, and I don't remember extending the contract.
Last June.
Oh, 2022?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this has been a long process. It would have been a lot shorter.
So we allowed a year and a half, like a year extension, from June 22 to August? That's a really long
That's how
extension
long it
period.
takes to get through the city of St. Cloud and to have all their public community meetings. And then they go through the review processes and.
Okay, so
back
that was
out
the,
to another
that
public
was the
meeting.
request for the extension, was because they were going to go to.
Well, there was more to it than that.
And you know why we want to straighten out the island.
Yeah.
And really, the comments were mainly based on, school circulate, comments that they didn't have the right to make. It wasn't on Ashton Wood's product line and what they were delivering and what it looked like. Really, the comments were mainly about the school.
Our parking
Queuing,
for Lakeview,
right.
which we will be able to address from the funds of the sale and by the additional roads that Ashton will be building in the area that will allow us to redo the parking stacking queue.
We know that as a fact,
What,
what you're saying?
the roads?
No, that based on this sale, that we are improving the circumstances?
Yeah, we've already created our preliminary construction drawings for that, and upon receipt of the funds, then Dave and his team will move forward with the actual plans. Yes, sir.
Pine Tree. So we went out to market on Pine Tree. Gosh, this is probably going on a year. A year ago, we had the call for offers, unpriced. We got several offers. They were within market. We were very happy with them. We chose a buyer. And in the midst of the negotiations with that buyer, the market changed drastically and quickly. And that buyer backed out of the negotiations. They never signed the contract. They gracefully bowed out in case they ever wanted to come back, but the numbers just didn't make sense anymore. We went to our number two, and our number two was still interested. They did submit a revised offer, which was about $1.6 million less than what they had offered last year. And we have just continued to market the property. We didn't engage in negotiations with that buyer. We have been told that there are a few other offers coming in. Julius, you can probably attest to this. I mean, the market has, although there's a lot of uncertainty, the home builders have figured out a way to soften some of the blow through incentivizing buying down points and things of that nature to try to get their absorption numbers back up, which they have. So there are buyers interested. Unfortunately, John, it is mainly in the build for rent market. That's where a lot of people are having issues, and so they're providing housing and trying to fulfill that housing shortage that we have when they can't be building for purchase. So, so these are both this offers for a build for rent community. It's not an apartment format. They're not in big buildings with interior or exterior stairways. They are in townhome formats, but they are for rent.
There has
Remember
been
we were
a
talking before about
discussion,
affordable housing on our
about a week ago, there was a discussion with the deputy county administrator and I, where the county has expressed interest in looking at buying this property to make it a park. So before we do anything privately, we're gonna run that rabbit down to see if the county wants it to make it a park.
So that's where we are with that.
Now, did the city of St. Cloud go ahead with their park inside the community? Because at the end of Pine Tree, remember we were talking, because that was one of my ideas, is why even sell it and create more houses when we can create a park out of it. And the city said they weren't interested.
Right.
But then I see like 6 months later, they want to build a park like inside a community versus here on the outside. Is that what you're saying, or is it the county
It's
itself?
Osceola County who has expressed an interest to put a park at this site.
Not the city.
Is it in county property, or is it
It's
city
city
limits?
St. Cloud property.
Are they allowed to do that? Okay. Well, I'm just curious, I guess they can build land anywhere, but.
As long as they give us the money they're supposed to get, I'll let them worry about what they can do about it.
So as long as everyone's okay with it, we'll just keep it status quo. We're not losing anything by talking with the county and trying to see if that would work, so. The only other point on your presentation is our new acquisitions. We have found several opportunities. That's one thing that this market is doing, is shaking up some land opportunities that either were under contract and now are available, or others that need to sell for one reason or another that didn't need to sell before. So we do have several things to look at in all of these different areas. And so we'll be doing that on our biweekly calls. Any other questions?
Me.
All right.